Welcome to the Charitable Gifting of Real Estate with the Alliance on Unity Radio 97.9 FM. We are Worcester's community connection, and you can watch us live streamed at WUTY979fm.org. And the Alliance for Charitable Real Estate has been created because there's quite a disconnect between property owners and nonprofits, and how the nonprofits could be funded and really grow exponentially when they understand the charitable gifting of real estate. And also, with me having a real estate background, I know the struggles that the real estate agents go through of prospecting and door knocking and competing for commission and just all the things that they go through. So with my background, when I saw all these different disconnects, I found a wonderful group called the Realty Gift Fund, which is basically the facilitating nonprofit that helps to be the secret sauce in all of that. So today, my guest is Bob Tate, and I'm so excited about Bob because Bob is a property owner who has donated a couple of properties for the charitable gifting of real estate, who's worked with Realty Gift Fund and is on as big of a mission as I am to make sure that the nonprofits get funded, that the property owners understand the benefits to them, that the real estate agents know that they get guaranteed full listing commission working with us at the Alliance. Bob Tate, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Cammie. It's a pleasure to be here. And I am Bob Tate, and I am a retiree. I'm involved in working with a number of the land conservation agencies in Colorado, where I reside, particularly statewide and regional land trusts. And my passion is water and land conservation.
Beautiful. So we've got 4 segments to play together, 4 12-minute segments for our show. So let's use this first segment to help people understand who you are, what your history is. I want them to see that, you know, property owners of all kinds can, could, should, would be donating these properties if they knew the benefits. So let's talk a little bit about your past. You said you're retired. What are you retired from?
I retired from the corporate world almost 20 years ago. And during that time, I was a director of HR and corporate real estate for my companies. Immediately following my retirement, I worked for a couple years as a commercial real estate broker. This was all back in St. Louis, where I grew up and worked. And in the early 2000s, I retired and moved to Colorado, first living in Fort Collins, Colorado, and now living in Denver.
So you actually have a bit of a history with real estate. So when you were in corporate and handling their real estate division, was there ever any talk about the charitable gifting of real estate?
No, there was not. My particular end of it was I specifically focused on finding primarily office space for my company operations throughout the U.S. and then eventually in a few countries in Europe as well. So I would find what type and location of real estate that they needed to operate, look at those properties, negotiate a business deal on behalf of the company, and then oversee the lease negotiations, and as well as the fit out of the space, and then the eventual move of the operations into the space. Conversely, where we cease to have need for the property, I would work on an exit strategy to move us out of it.
I really want our listeners to know, I mean, you've been in real estate in some form or fashion for several decades, and back then they didn't know about the charitable gifting, but it's actually been in our tax law since 1917, is what Bruce has taught me. So for over 100 years, yet when you were in corporate and you were looking for exit strategies, it never came up. When looking back on it now, Bob, knowing what you know now, were there ways that you could have implemented this in corporate?
Not in my particular position, because we were just strictly lessees. We never actually, other than our corporate headquarters, we never actually owned the properties that we operated out of. Had we done so, had we owned any of these properties, and we had discussions along those lines a couple times, but chose not to go that route, that certainly would have been an opportunity, particularly in some of the tougher markets that we were looking to exit. But no, we didn't. Being a lessee, we weren't owners of the properties per se.
So just for our listeners to know, when you are wanting to donate a piece of property, obviously you need to own it, and any property, land, commercial, strip mall, house, condo, beach house, anything as long as it's not timeshare is good for donation. So you mentioned that you got into commercial real estate. I'm also curious, as a commercial real estate agent, had you ever heard of this?
I had not. And there again, I was primarily representing clients that were looking to acquire property via leasing. Although I did have one client that, looking back on that owned a warehouse that he wanted to get out from under. And had I known about this concept at that point, I certainly would have teed that up with him, because he was having an extreme difficulty unloading this particular piece of property. So no, I wish I had known about it at that point. And again, this is going back almost 20 years now. I certainly would have, at least brought that possibility up with him when we were considering other options than just selling the property itself.
Well, even as a leasing agent, I'm sure that in the days and months and years that you did it, you knew about 1031 tax exchange. Like, when we're going to all these conferences and networking events and trainings and workshops, I'm speaking from experience, because when I was in real estate for 15 years, top 5% as a residential agent, I had never heard of it. And it's not about residential or commercial specifically, and it's not always just about unloading a property. It could be, like, for example, just in the last 45 days of me really delving into this, one of my friends who's a fellow speaker has a condo that he bought 20 years ago for a girlfriend at the time. They're not girlfriend, boyfriend. Now she's a tenant. He owns the property outright. And he's just like, you know what, it might be nice to actually just donate the property, because especially also because of the PR that he could do around having donated the property to a women's shelter or something like that. So I think it's fascinating. I never heard of it. You never heard of it. And 99% of the people I've talked to haven't heard of it. And the ones who have heard of it have misconceptions about it, including thinking that, oh, it's just people who want to unload some garbage dog property, but that's just not the case. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that was certainly not the case. Really, I've done two of these types of donations. One with the Nature Conservancy, who handled the donation in-house, because they were the beneficiaries, and they have that capability that they can accept gifts of real estate and handle the disposal of it. And the second, the most recent one that we're talking about with Realty Gift Fund in Bruce. So yeah, it's a really very seamless process, and one that, if I think there are lots of property owners out there that need to be made aware of this. And because in my case, this was one of a few rental homes that I owned in Fort Collins, and none of which are like crucial to my cash flow. And particularly now living in Denver, do I have any day-to-day interaction with the properties? They're under management. They're highly appreciated market-wise. They also have been depreciated for tax purposes over almost 10 years. So all of them have a large basis, a, a, a large gap between what would be the selling price and what they've been depreciated down to, all of which means capital gains for the property owner if they end up selling the real estate. So that was certainly the case in both of the properties that I've donated in over the last several years.
Well, I really want to delve into that. I appreciate that you brought up the basis and the capital gains. When we come back from break, we'll get more into that. Like, when you look at a net sheet of what it would look like to sell, straight out regular traditional sell versus a donation, so that our listeners can start thinking for themselves, wow, maybe it's a good idea for me to donate. You are listening to Unity Radio. We are live on Facebook, Facebook Live, and also live streamed on WUTY979FM.org. You can listen to us live on 97.9 FM. Now, right now, we are recording on Zoom because we're in the pandemic, but soon we will be live again, and we invite you to watch or listen. And we are also starting to create libraries of our shows. And one of the great things about Unity Radio is it's not one specific kind of music or one specific kind of talk radio. It's all different types of education in the marketplace. So we will be right back and have another section with Bob Tate.